Hello. If you don't know who I am, my name's Paul Crowther. I'm the Associate Minister at Holy Trinity Spittal. If you're one of the people who used to come along to our afternoon service when we were able to meet, can I just say that I'm really missing all of you. I'll let you into a secret if you want. I'm missing you loads, but do you know what I'm missing the most? I'm missing Ruth's coffee the most. Ruth, I'm not caffeinated enough. I'm really not enjoying it. Well, all of us are feeling isolated, aren't we? It's easy at these times to feel alone. And I've chosen a reading from a book in the Old Testament today. It's a book called 1 Kings. We're going to be in chapter 19. And it's a book where there's a follower of God who feels alone, who at one point ends up self-isolating. So it's an appropriate passage for this moment in time. But it's a passage that also contains a real encouragement for us when we're going through dark times. So I'm looking forward to be able to share it with you this afternoon. I'm going to read it first. Before I do that, let me just explain who the main characters in the story are. So we've got Elijah. He is a prophet. That's the one who God is speaking through at the time. And God, just before our passage, has just done an amazing miracle through Elijah. He's basically in Israel, and at the time there's a load of people there in the country who are worshipping a fake god called Baal instead of the real God. And just before the passage we get to, Elijah's just done an amazing miracle which has proven that Baal is not a real god and that there's only one true living God. But at the time the kingdom's got a king called King Ahab, who's not a brilliant king. That's putting it mildly. And he's married to a lady who is awful, really, called Jezebel. And just before the bit we're going to read, Jezebel has gone to her husband, King Ahab, and convinced him to go and kill Elijah. So the king has decided Elijah's going to die. And Elijah does what many of us would have done in that situation. He runs. And we're going to pick up the story when he begins to run. So we're reading from 1 Kings chapter 19, and we're going to start from verse 3. And it says this: Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, Get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he travelled for 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. Here he is in self-isolation. And then the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. But the Israelites, they've rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with a sword. I'm the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me too. The Lord said, Go and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord's about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Then the Lord said to him, Go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king of Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." So here's the prophet Elijah. And when we meet him, he's in desperate times. He's saying, look, I'm zealous for God, but the Israelites, they've rejected your covenant, your promises. They've broken down all your altars. They put your prophets to death with a sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Elijah's saying, even though I've done the right things, God, your people, they've rejected your promise. Your people, they've rejected your plan. They're not praising you. They're worshipping a false god, Baal, not the true God. They've killed all the prophets you've sent them. And I'm a prophet. And now they're going to kill me. Elijah feels distressed. He feels down in the mouth. He feels gloomy and heartbroken. He is low-spirited and troubled. He feels alone. And he thinks God's plan is about to fail completely. I wonder if you feel a bit like that now. Maybe when you're feeling isolated and alone, you start to feel and think these things. Do you feel like that with your beliefs sometimes? Are you tempted to give up on what you believe about Jesus and what you believe about the Bible? Well, Elijah thinks he has a great idea. His idea is this: I'm going to go up a mountain, but not just any old mountain. I'm going to go up a famous mountain. You see, Elijah remembered a time when God made a promise and a plan with the Israelites 500 years before he was around. He made this promise, God, to Moses, up a mountain, and the promise he made to him there was called a covenant, a very special type of promise. And Moses up that mountain getting the covenant, it's where we get the Ten Commandments from. If you want to know where they come from in the Bible, they're part of that covenant. And Elijah says, I'm going to go to that mountain where Moses was, and I'm going to get a new plan, because God's plan has clearly failed. And so he heads off to get a new one. And so he eats and drinks, and we're told he travels for 40 days and 40 nights until he reaches Horeb, the mountain of God. When he gets there, he goes in a cave and spends the night. And then God speaks to him. And God's first thing he says to him is a question. What are you doing here, Elijah? What is he doing there? He's gone there to tell God his plans failed. That he's the last true believer and there are people now trying to kill him. That's why he's gone to this mountain. He's not just trying to go up to have a bit of quiet time up a mountain. He's walked past tons of mountains to get to this one. No, he is going up the mountain, the special mountain, to tell God people are no longer following him, to tell God he needs to try something new. I wonder if you could identify with that. I think at times we're all tempted to feel like we want something new from God. Maybe you'd like something new from God now. Maybe when life was going well, before this lockdown, before this outbreak, this was enough for you. But now you're in dark times. Maybe you're starting to doubt this is enough for you. Maybe you're doubting that Jesus is enough. Maybe you want something new. Not just that old book. Maybe you want something more than just Jesus. Well, God's got an answer for Elijah. He's got an answer for us too. And God's answer is this: my plan does not change because my plan has not failed. So let's go back to Elijah. God sends Elijah up the mountain to the same place where Moses stood all those years before. He tells him to stand out on the mountain, and God's about to pass by. And Elijah at this point is thinking, great, I'm about to get a new plan from God here, totally new promise. God's about to give me a plan B. But do you notice what happened? Follow from verse 11. There's a great and powerful wind, but we're told that God's not in the wind. Then there's a great and powerful earthquake, but we're told the Lord's not in the earthquake. Then there's a fire, but we're told the Lord's not in the fire. And after the fire, there's a gentle whisper. Literally translated, there's a sound. And Elijah hears it. He puts his cloak over his face. He goes out and stands at the mouth of the cave. And he does not get a new promise. No, instead, what he gets is the same conversation with God over again. A voice comes to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And Elijah repeats himself, "I've been zealous for the Lord. They've rejected your covenant, though, broke down your altars, put your prophets to death with a sword. I am the last one left. And now they're about to kill me too." And do you see what God says back to him? God says back to him, "Go back the way you came." Then he tells him to anoint Elisha to succeed him as prophet. And then he tells him that he has 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him. You see, God says to Elijah, my plan has not failed. That's why he tells him, firstly, to go back. Go back. No new plan. Not only that, when you're going back, I want you to appoint a new prophet, because guess what? You think you're the last prophet? You're not going to be the last prophet. There's someone who's coming after you. My plan's going to carry on after you. It's not failed. And let me give you some evidence my plan is working. You are not as alone as you think. There are 7,000 people who are still following me. Go back, Elijah. No new plan, for my plan has not failed. And Elijah leaves. That is what Elijah needed to learn in his day, and it's what we need to learn today too. Stick with God, because his plan has not failed and you are not alone. It's so easy to feel like God's plan is failing at times. It's so easy to feel like you're alone. But if you're a Christian, you're not alone. There are Christians around the whole world. And there are more people becoming Christians every day. There is a massive revival of the church in China. And in your life right now, and in my life right now, we might be finding it really difficult at the moment. You might be finding it difficult because of the lockdown and the situation you're in. You might be finding it difficult because someone else is making it hard for you to be a Christian. Well, can I encourage you to stick with Jesus? Can I encourage you to think about him seriously if you haven't already? Because God's plan is being worked out. It has not failed. And if you are a Christian, you are not alone. Do not be tempted to give up on Jesus. Even at times when you feel alone like Elijah did, dare to keep going because God is working out his promises. His plan has not failed. Our God is still sovereign and you are not alone. I'd love to encourage you to listen to a song that Lucas has been really encouraged by this week. He's made a video of it. You can see a link to that video at the end of this one. Please, at this time, stay safe, stay connected with us while we can't meet, and stay trusting in our wonderful God who always keeps his promises. God bless.